It was intentional. That's what the French prosecutor says about the crash in the Alps. The Germanwings co-pilot set the course that killed 149 innocent passengers and crew, a fate they only realized right before impact. Their screams, some of the last sounds recorded on the plane's cockpit recorder. We have more on the co-pilot with Guy Henderson live from Montauban, Germany. But first, let's go live to Kate Parkinson in the French Alps with these revelations about the plane's very last moments. Kate, what are you learning from investigators?
Well, a shocking conclusion from French investigators, having analysed the audio from the cockpit voice recorder. They say that the plane was crashed deliberately. The co-pilot had locked the other pilot out of the cockpit and deliberately flew the plane into the side of the mountain. Here is what the French prosecutor had to say.
L'interprétation la plus plausible, la plus vraisemblable pour nous.
The most plausible, realistic interpretation, as far as we are concerned, is that the co-pilot, through voluntary abstention, refused to open the door of the cabin to the captain. He refused to open the door of the cabin to the captain, which caused the aircraft to lose altitude.
De la cabine de pilotage au commandant de bord.
The prosecutor also revealed that the co-pilot, identified as 28-year-old German national Andreas Lubitz, was fully aware of what he was doing, in that he was alive until that final moment of impact. They say he was breathing normally, indicating there was no sign that he had suffered a medical condition, for example, a heart attack or a stroke, but they say he was completely silent in those final 10 minutes. He did not respond to the contact from air traffic control, nor did he respond to the increasingly frantic pounding on the door from the other pilot that he had locked outside. And in a very chilling detail, as you mentioned, the prosecutor also said that the cockpit voice recorder also picked up the screaming terror of the passengers in those final moments before the plane slammed into the side of the mountain here in the south of France.
Kate, obviously this is horrible for the victims' families as they are visiting the crash site for the first time today. What are some of the questions that they're asking of investigators at this point?
Well, they had clearly asked for privacy because the families were kept well away from the media, or rather we were kept well away from them, so we haven't been able to ask them any questions, but we do know that they are deeply shocked by this new information. The prosecutor did brief the families before he held the press conference and said they were struggling to come to terms with what they had heard. We did see them as they approached the crash site, though, and I have to say they were displaying great dignity and stoicism, clearly united in their grief and shock. Interestingly, the co-pilot's family also here in the south of France, but we're told his family are being kept separate from the victims' families.
Kate Parkinson, thank you so much, reporting live from the French Alps. Well, throughout the day, details have emerged about the co-pilot, 28-year-old Andreas Lubitz. And France says he deliberately put the plane into a descent, but the question on everyone's mind is why. CCTV's Guy Henderson picks up that part of the story from Germany in the co-pilot's hometown. Guy, what are you hearing about Andreas Lubitz?
Well, it is widely known now from that press conference earlier in the day that Andreas Lubitz is 28 years old, that he has been flying for Germanwings since September 2013, that he's clocked more than 600 flying hours during that time. Now, we are just arrived in the town of Montauban, which, as you say, is the place where his parents' house is, just behind me now. It's a place where he'd been living. He has had a second home in Düsseldorf, which police raided a few hours ago. The information we can deem so far is that he seemed to be a very normal young man. The Guardian newspaper is reporting that he was into climbing and was a member of a local climbing club. We have been to visit the flying school just on the outskirts of this town. One of the long-standing members of that club has been telling reporters that this was a young man who seemed to enjoy his job. He was well integrated and seemed to be a happy young man. So all in all, not seemingly, at least on the surface from what we can tell so far, a man with a particularly troubled background. But obviously something went terribly awry at some point.
Obviously, guys, so no indication of a motive right now. From everything you're hearing, this was a seemingly happy young man, excited about his new job. I also have read reports online that said that he had dabbled in this for a while, in flying since he was much younger, and had dreamed of this, and everything was going very well for him. He was a calm individual, I read various reports. Are people just as perplexed as you are at this moment as to what happened?
I think completely and utterly perplexed. There is obviously nothing that could prepare people for why this apparently quiet young man would seemingly intentionally drive this plane towards the ground with all 149 passengers on board. The CEO of Lufthansa in that press conference earlier had said that all pilots undergo very stringent medical and psychological tests in order to qualify as pilots. He described them as some of the best pilots in the world. Somehow this young man seemed to slip through the net. He did, though, reveal one detail. Most of the background was kept confidential, he said, but he did reveal one detail. Just listen to this.
There was, I want to mention this, a longer break in his training 6 years ago, but after his qualifications were checked again, he took up his training again. Following that, he passed all medical and flight-related tests. He was 100% fit to fly without any limitations or requirements.
Now, a report that is being widely circulated in the international media now comes from a tweet sent by the chief reporter of German newspaper Der Spiegel. This chief reporter says that he has spoken to friends of this young man and that in 2009, roughly within the same timeline as the CEO was discussing there, back in 2009, he had suffered a burnout and a mental breakdown of some sort. Now, obviously, the two may not be linked. It may be that the checks had cleared him regardless of that, but that may well now be a line of inquiry for investigators.
Well, Guy Henderson, thank you so much for trying to find some answers that are on questions and to some answers that are on answers to questions that are on so many people's mind.